morning, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is David Okun. I'm talking about the pay in the United Kingdom. I'm talking about broadly about work, and I'm also talking about the system of government, of policy, of politics, of economics, and also to see how the market system works and the law in this country. Today we are going to talk about the laws governing pay, in particular child care vouchers and the minimum wage. And we have been talking about the minimum wage as a form of pay, and it's a continuation of the other videos. If you watch this, watch with the rest of the video. If you are in the UK, if you're outside the UK, then you can also watch this because they're connected. If you watch the rest of the video, leave a comment below and let me know if you need something specific for me to talk about. Otherwise, I'll always be going through this information, and where necessary, I will stop and provide some kind of like comments. Also, leave a comment, subscribe to this channel if you haven't subscribed to the channel, and also click notification bell, click like, and share with family and friends the videos. Watch the rest of the video as well if you have time. Thank you so much. And let us talk about childcare and the national minimum wage. And therefore, an employer can offer childcare to support the employees under a salary sacrifice scheme. This is a scheme which allows the employee to give up the right to receive part of their pay due under their contract in return for some form of non-cash benefit such as childcare vouchers. Leave a comment below, let me know if this is something you would be interested in as a positive in terms of how employer pay their employees. A salary sacrifice scheme must not reduce the workers' taxable wages below the national minimum wage. Therefore, if a worker is currently earning the national minimum wage, they are not entitled to receive childcare vouchers within a salary sacrifice scheme unless the employer offers the vouchers free of tax and national insurance, and over and above the workers are normal earnings. Stay tuned, continue watching. You can find out more information about salary sacrifice and childcare payment, including information about how childcare vouchers may affect any statutory payments, benefits, or tax credit payments received on the HMRC website. HMRC is Majesty Revenue and Customs. It's a tax office website here in the UK, www.hmrc.gov.uk. It also includes an online calculator how over time or premium rates of pay are treated. Also, you can look at this information. A worker may be paid at a higher rate for working at a particular time or for particular duties, for example, for overtime shifts or on bank holidays. So, if so, the premium element of the payment, that is the amount above basic pay, does not count towards national minimum wage pay. Watch this video and also watch the rest of the videos because they are connected. It's a continuation. Therefore, any premium rate or pay above the basic rate must be subtracted from the worker's pay before it is compared to the national minimum wage. If the worker is paid a higher rate for working at night or weekends, the difference between the basic rate and the higher rate does not count towards national minimum wage. It must therefore be subtracted from the worker's pay before the pay is compared to the national minimum wage. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. Continue watching how meals are provided by employers. And if the employer provides the worker with the meals, such meals do not represent an amount of pay. Provision of meals does not, therefore, count towards the workers' national minimum wage pay. However, an employer may require a worker to eat in, for example, the staff canteen, and then deduct an amount from their wages for meals. The worker must still receive the national minimum wage in addition to any amount deducted for meals. So if a deduction for meals is made by the employer, the national minimum wage pay is calculated after any deduction for meals is made. I'll leave a comment below to let me know what you're thinking. So let's talk about tips and gratuities. And tips and gratuities in which in cash, which are voluntarily given by a customer or to a worker, such as a waiter, count as a gift from the customer to the worker, and therefore do not form a part of the worker's pay. And we talked about this in the other videos as well. If a service charge is compulsory, that is, it is added to all bills automatically. It is the property of the employer, and the employer can share it out with the between the workers as the employer wishes. The employer is not obliged to pass the service charge on to the workers for any pay reference period beginning on or after the 1st October 2009. The service charge will not form part of the worker's wages, whether it is paid through the payroll or not. If a tip is paid by a customer voluntarily adding an extra amount to a credit card or a check payment, the tip is the property of the employer. The employer is not obliged to pass the service charge on to the workers. For any pay reference period beginning on or after the 1st October 2009, the service charge will not form a part of the worker's wages, whether it is paid through the payroll or not. Further information about how tips are treated for the purposes of the minimum wage, tax, and national insurance contribution is available from the HMRC website at www.hmrc.gov.uk. Advice is also available from ACAS Appline. These are repeatable information already. We have discussed this severally. They are repeatable to contextualize information in terms of a specific pay structure or component, so to speak. Tips paid through a trunk. If you comment below, let me know what you're thinking. A trunk system is where tips, gratuities, and service charges are pooled and distributed to workers according to an agreed formula. If you comment below, for pay reference period which start on or after the 1st of October 2009, tips and gratuities paid through a tronic system do not count as part of the worker's wage, so do not count towards the worker's minimum wage. Thank you so much. For pay reference periods which started before the 1st October 2009, voluntary cash tips which are paid through the trunk system do not count towards the national minimum wage. Voluntary tips paid by credit card or check, which are paid into the dedicated trunk master's bank account for distribution among the workers, do not account towards the national minimum wage. However, voluntary tips, whether paid by cash, credit card, or check, which are passed by a trunk master to an employer and are then paid to workers through the payroll account towards the national minimum wage. Stay tuned, continue watching, leave a comment below. More information about tips, gratuities, and service charges is available on HMRC website at www.hmrc.gov.uk. Advice is also available from the ACAS Appline. This you can access from anywhere in the world, whether you are in the UK, or you're outside the United Kingdom, remember I said information available on government website of the UK might be similar to information in your country. It may also be probably the same, because we're talking about a global system in the UK, in the developed world, particularly in Europe, in what happened in the United Kingdom, and also what happened in the rest of the world to be similar. And this is probably a good or bad thing. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about globalization, marketization, free market in particular, because free market relate to whether or not the government regulate the market, and increasingly now, because privatization is intensified, and the idea of freedom is also on the increase. People like their freedom from the state. Within the private sector, when the economy is privatized, the government increasingly is seceding, if I may use that word, refraining, maybe it's a better word, refraining from regulating the market economy. That means there is more power to businesses, and there's less power to the consumer, including workers or employees. As we are talking about their pay, there is something called statutory regulation, or giving rights of employment, and including issues on pay and also contract. Regulation is managed by statute. So statutory frameworks are actually there to regulate organization. Now the politics of the market is subject to withdraw from the government, withdrawing from regulating the market system, which means contract now increasingly is going to be the kind of legal relationship between employee and employer. That means there is going to be almost absolute power in the hands of the employer, especially big corporations like, I don't know, leave a comment below, let me know, like Amazon, Sainsbury's. A lot of people should know Amazon, and organizations owned like X, like maybe, I don't know, Tesla, or organizations owned by people like Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos. These are big corporations, big car companies, airplane, luxury vehicles. So you increasingly you find employer of multi-billion companies are going to increasingly become more powerful, and that will lead to exploitation. That's equally about employment. Something I've been talking about repeatedly is the rise of the machine taking away work. And if work is taken away, I've also said it before, I'm only repeating it. And you comment below and let me know if you have heard me saying this before, that when technology take away work from people will be unemployed, and that means people will have no income, and they will have absolutely nothing, no sustenance. And this is something people should start paying attention about, the changes happening. Stay tuned, continue watching. There is no right for workers to receive statements about national minimum pay. However, the government has recommended that the employer should, as good practice, ensure that their staff know the basic facts about national insurance, national minimum wage. So, like I also said previously already, that the people in this country, in whatever country, who will be listening to these videos, to know that increasingly, because of the idea of freedom, including free enterprise as the market infrastructure, market logic, for example, people like us, you and I, are now being released from the grip of the state. Freedom comes with responsibility, and this is my primary message to the British people, that if you want freedom, as you do, you're going to have to take responsibility for your life, whether you're poor or rich. And my argument has always been that people will really suffer if the government doesn't help them. The government cannot help you if it doesn't tax or borrow. The only way the government can help people who are not wealthy If you are multimillionaire, you don't need the government to tax or to borrow, because you don't need public sector. But the rest, perhaps 90% of the population of British people will need public sector. You cannot have public sector without taxation, without borrowing. Those are the only probably. Actually, I don't see anywhere else because of privatization. In the past, the government used to own the economy publicly, but now it has sold off all the public businesses. They are now owned privately. These private people are there to make money. If they don't make money, they shut down the economy. That's why you have seen with the health service, with the education system, with housing, people are not getting housing, people are not getting education because of privatization. This simple privatization may sound like a fancy word, but you see, the reality of privatization, the British people have to really understand that if you don't borrow, if you don't tax, especially taxing people who are very rich, and also borrowing money, which also is being borrowed by the government. Borrowing, the money comes from private individuals because the banks, the financial instruments are sort of, they're private. So when we talk about borrow, the reason the government does not want to borrow, because the government is now powerless. It has transferred power away from the public. You and I no longer have power. We don't have an economy. Those who have economy are now multimillionaires and multi-billionaires. And this money, if we borrow from the rich. Because they are the ones who have money. The government already do not have money. The Bank of England has been made independent. You could argue that it has been privatized. When it is privatized, it is shut down as the public sector. It is owned privately. Which means the government has to borrow money. It has to borrow from multimillionaires, from private individuals. Because the country is sort of, there's nothing left. And if down below, if you think Britain, a country like Britain, still have a country, you don't. Even the roads, if you travel from London going to the north, there are road tolls, and these road tolls, I don't know, leave a comment below, but I think it is going to be increasing. To walk on the road, you're going to pay. To walk on the road, you're going to pay. For the police, the police are going to be privatized. The military is going to be privatized. We may still have it, but most of the elements, perhaps 90% of the military system, the security system is already sort of, you know, because who supplies the guns and bombs? Private companies. Vehicles for the defense, the technology, private companies. So that is what privatization looks like. So that's what I've been trying to explain. But now I'm trying to kind of like get some information from the internet just to try and defend some part of the video, things I said previously in terms of employment, housing, and especially privatization. I don't know how much I should say more. Thank you so much for your patience and watching this, because these things are policy and laws, and they are really complicated. And thank you so much for your patience, allowing me to struggle to try and explain this, what is really complicated and sometimes tedious. But you know, it's our responsibilities, our life, and we have to really run our lives. If you're poor, if you're rich, especially the rich can buy technology to run their life. Machine, I mean, things like what do you call it? 3D printer can now autonomously be building products, goods and services. And you maybe in 100 years, machines like drone will be everywhere. Autonomous vehicles, like artificial intelligence. These are exciting times, but if you don't have money, you're going to be excluded. Who will give you? I mean, people don't give things to people. I mean, go to the super rich, go to King Charles and ask for money. You will probably be arrested because they are very rich. They are trying to protect their wealth. If I am rich and I'm not, I will probably get you arrested by private security also, because I will be afraid for myself. People coming in trying to ask me for money because they don't have money, I'm going to shut them off, because if I start giving them money, they are probably going to be robbed or even killed. that is the kind of society we are heading towards. So, we need to be in the next 100 to 500 years, for example, it's just from the top of my head. You'll find robots. Some robots may even look like human beings. You may not be able to distinguish between robot and human, but there will be security protection. They will not look like what we know now. The police will shut down. The military system will shut down. Everything is going to shut down. Now, you have private security system. You know that they are increasing in power. Some of them will be carrying guns. Some of them will be doing close protection. And that is the transformation happening. The traffic wardens are an example of privatization, because we are private. They are part of the national security in terms of the civil component of national security. That is because the police used to do traffic work. They still do it, but now it's being privatized. That's why you see traffic warden. You see private securities. If you go to the office at the reception, you see there are securities people. I've been explaining this, and I'll continue to explain it over. People who watch my video must be really frustrated, because some of these things I've been repeating them because it's important. And this thing streams on my channel, and some people haven't really heard about what I've been trying to say. I know they know. I assume they probably know. But I'm just trying to share, and that's why I ask people to make comments to kind of try to understand what they understand. If I am wrong, if I'm right, because like the information I'm going through now, some people are giving me feedback. They don't understand it. They don't understand it right, because it's the nature of the thing. I'm just trying to go through it so that you understand. When I say the law and policy is complicated, people will think I am actually maybe making things up. But if I go through a material like this, my purpose is for people to be my witness, know that these things are really complicated. They need experts. They need people who are professional to understand it, to interpret it. Otherwise, people will be excluded from rights, because laws give rights and responsibilities. And if you don't know your right, if it's not your responsibility, you cannot be free. So we talk of freedom. We need to understand freedom goes hand in glove with responsibility. So if you're a child, if you are an adult, if you're a mother, if you're a father, you have to be a student and also a professor. That is the new age. The knowledge generation, the knowledge age. Younger people are now very proficient in using mobile phones. They use mobile phone even more than me. I mean, you talk about 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds are even better in using computers sometimes more than me. So these are some of the things I've been talking about. Our life. It's like lifestyle. Our life goes. And in terms of knowledge, in terms of information, specifically trying to, discuss things like policy, law, and our society is affected, and different issues of food, energy, housing. I've been talking about this over and over, and I'm so happy I did. And thank you so much for your support and being supported. The people who give feedback, because we are a very small channel at the moment. We are really, really small. And my hope is that going forward, we will become bigger as an infrastructure, and we're going to do more, because the more the merrier, the bigger the better. Thank you so much, and stay tuned, continue watching. Stay tuned. Continue watching. Most employees have statutory right to itemize pay statements. For example, for an example of how to calculate national minimum wage, because national minimum wage is essentially statutory. If you have been watching this video, you know what statutory problem is. If you don't, leave a comment below, then I can make a video to explain what a statutory system is, if that's needed. So you can also look at online, gov.uk and all the other websites I've been mentioning. You watch the other videos and watching them with this, so you can find out more about which employees have a right to itemize pay statements and what they must contain. So the employer's duty to keep records about the national minimum wage is something you can pay attention to, and if it is itemized, it's a legal requirement. If you work for a living, employers must keep sufficient records relating to all workers to qualify for the national minimum wage, to establish that they are receiving at least the national minimum wage. The Department for Business, Innovation and Skills, this is government department in the United Kingdom, BIS, provide guidance on what counts as a sufficient record. All these are on gov.uk. You will always find it there. Records may be kept on a computer or in a manual file. They must be kept for at least 3 years, although employers may be advised to keep records going back 6 years, because a breach of contract claims can be made in the civil courts for up to 6 years from the date of the claim. So employers who have a daily average agreement with the workers must also keep a copy of the agreement. If the workers' work is related to rated output work, the employer must keep a copy of the written notice about this that they have given the worker. The employer must also keep a copy of the information needed to show how the they worked out the mean hourly output rate and the fair piece rate. If there is a dispute about wages paid, the burden of proof is on the employer to show that they have paid at least the national minimum wage. The regulations do not state what counts as sufficient records. BIS guidance says that the definition will vary from one employer to another, and from one worker to another. Employers should be aware that should a worker bring an NW a national minimum wage claim to an employment tribunal or court, the burden of proof will be on the employer to show that the national minimum wage has been paid to that worker. The employer will need a record to provide this proof. The business innovation and service BIS guidance gives the following example of records that are sufficient to show that the worker is receiving national minimum wage in the following terms. Stay tuned, continue watching. So, in a situation involving the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills guidance, giving the following example of records that are sufficient to show that the worker is receiving the national minimum wage in the following way: gross pay paid to the worker over time and shift premiums, amounts of consolidated allowances, and the benefits received by the worker from the employers, any deduction or payments of accommodation, the amount of any tips given to the worker through the payroll, the amount of national minimum wage pay calculated, the total number of hours in the pay reference period, or fair estimate or daily average of hours to be worked. These are the elements to be included in the record. In absences, for example, rest breaks, sick leave, maternity leave, holiday, and any travel or training during work hours and its length, bank statements and other commercial documentation, and also the sufficient records must be kept in a single document for each pay reference period, so it is easy for the worker to access to them, and you can check this online if you want to help yourself. And if you go to an advisor, they will use similar or the same information. So if you actually do a study yourself, by the time you go to look for help, you will also know the rules. So the workers' rights of access to records about the national minimum wage. If a worker believes that they may be paid less, I mean, maybe they may be in a situation where they're being paid less than the national minimum wage, they have the right to examine and copy any of the employer's record relevant to their pay. They can ask someone else to accompany them to examine the records. For example, a trade union representative. See, this type of information is evidence that the government wants to empower its citizens, because you should be independent and non-dependent on the government or anybody else. So this is a wake-up call to us, because we are so used to the government, giving us lawyers and paying for lawyers, because the government doesn't have money now because the public sector has closed down. So now the private companies, you have to pay them. If you have money, then you can get this type of information. If you don't have, you have to now be an expert in everything, if you can, and do as much as you can, because of things which are necessary. Else, should be almost your own doctor. I'm not really trying to say you should be a doctor, because practically it might not be possible. But the more information you have about your health and your wellness, your well-being, your money, debt, income maximization, financial capability, all these skills, you now need to go online and help yourself, because people are now struggling. They have been left. Organizations which used to provide advice are shutting down because the government is not funding them, and that is the reality. The government may tell you something else because their responsibility is different from your responsibility, but you need to know the truth by accessing the internet. That's what the internet is there for, and the internet is still free mostly. You in the UK, you can afford it. In Africa, probably people can't, because in poor countries you cannot access the internet, and even things like social media is not accessible in poor country. Even in the UK, if you cannot manage your money effectively, you may not be able to use the internet, because you have to pay for it, and there's no money for people who are poor. And almost everybody was a multimillionaire. If you are not a multimillionaire, then you may well consider yourself to be poor, because you see, every time you have to borrow money, which is now shutting down because the banks are closing down. Because big businesses are the ones now going to be serviced. People will be shocked when they wake up one morning that they're trying to go to the bank to get credit, they cannot get it. And this is the reality, what is going to start happening now. People used to live thinking they are well off. I mean, even the middle class, even the working class, even people on benefit used to be allowed to borrow money, but now it's closing down. It's not done. It's closing down. The banks are actually closing down. Money itself is being closed down. Cash is being shut down. Ultimately, the economy will shut down, and technology will run the system of wealth and wealth management. It will not be economics. It will not be financial thing, because the machine will be clever, will be doing anything in maybe 100, 1,000 years in the future. But it is starting now, and people are now experiencing the impact of change. That's what I'm talking about. When I talk certain things, because I'm probably talking it on the social media, people begin to think. People don't even have much time to engage with serious matters, serious material. But I'm gently inviting the British people and the people of the world to start, being acquainted with self-studies, because to the extent that you can access the internet, if you can go to the public library, go and walk in the park, do what you want to do, especially if you are a pensioner, yeah, if you are maybe a student, if you're a young person, try your best to be in school and get as much knowledge as you can from the school and be independent as possible to survive. It is a matter of life and death, especially in the next 50 years, 100 years to come. It is going to be a matter of life and death. It is now getting very serious because housing is no longer there. Health is no longer there. And a lot of things we used to take for granted is gone because it has been sold off to private company. Private company do not provide public service at all. Because you see, the government has to fund private companies in order for private companies to provide public service. Otherwise, they won't. They will shut it down. And they are shutting down. We cannot access dentistry. If you phone your GP, if you have to stay for 2 hours, for 1 hour, for 30 minutes, even for 10 minutes, 10 minutes, you're phoning your whatever, even MPs, even your housing, you can't go through because the resources are not there. The resources are not there because it is sold off. It's all private. Private companies provide efficiency. They provide goods and services to people who have money. The idea of the public sector to provide public service, to provide the same service. The difference between public and private service is that services, private services are provided by private companies. Public services are provided by public services. The moment you hear the government talk of reform, the government is selling off something to private companies, they will fund it temporarily. And when people are getting comfortable accessing good service, because you see, people will be happy, oh, private companies are good. They don't know it is funding. It's nothing else. Because you see, we have technology, we have system of education, information is everywhere. People within the public sector work professionally. They're the same with private companies. Nothing is different except that the politics and the ideology is different, and also the way it is managed is different. Also, the fundamental difference between the public sector is there to support people who are not multimillionaires and multimillionaires because of the system of capitalism. There are a small elite group, people who are rich, people who are multimillionaires or multimillionaires. The private sector is designed to help them. There are people who are now comfortable because they still have a job. I mean, if you retire, you probably will retire to poverty if you're not careful. A few individuals will be doing well, but the majority will be doing worse and worse and worse because more and more going forward, wealth will be concentrated into the fewer in the hands of fewer. It's called stability. That's the only way in economic terms stability can be achieved. Because you see, if so many people have money, if so many people have access to goods and services, I mean, that money is to buy products, goods and services. And if you have a lot of money, there's going to create inflation. People call me, let me know, I'm not an economist. So if you think, money supply, if you think about it, if every time the government talk about controlling inflation, it's saying we want to take money away from poor people, who are the majority. They're the people responsible for creating inflation. So inflation policy is policy against poor people, the majority of the population. Because it is true in economic terms, they are the ones who spend in terms because they have numbers. They have their money. They are maybe 90% of the population. So they are the ones who create inflation. But even if they are poor, they just create inflation, you see. And rich people may be spending something similar, but they will be living in luxury, but they might not even be creating inflation as much as poor people, because rich people may be only 5%. They can get whatever they want. They are multimillionaires and billionaires. They live in luxury. But they don't create problems within the economy, within the market system, within the capitalistic system of the economy, where inflation should be managed, interest rates should be managed, all these things. So, you comment below, let me know what you're thinking. And thank you. I'm so happy to share this opportunity with you. So if a worker believes that they are maybe being paid less than the national minimum wage, they have the right to examine and copy any of the employer's records relevant to their pay. They can ask someone else to accompany them to examine the records. For example, a trade union representative, the worker must have a written request to their employer stating that they want to see the records. The records must give the information listed in the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills, BIS guidance. Stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. So once a worker has requested the records, the employer must give notice to the worker of the time and place at which they can be seen. These will either be at the worker's place of work or some other convenient place. The employer must produce the records within 14 days of the worker's request at an alternative time agreed between the employer and the worker. Stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. If the employer refuses to let the worker see the records or fail to produce the record, the worker can make a complaint to an employment tribunal. If the tribunal upholds the complaint, it will require the employer to pay the worker a fine of 80 times the current adult level of the national minimum wage. Now stay tuned, continue watching, leave a comment below, let me know what you're thinking. The National Minimum Wage Compliance Officers have powers to require employers to produce records. Can a worker agree to be paid less than the national minimum wage? A worker cannot agree with their employer to accept a wage lower than the national minimum wage, even if they want to do so. A worker cannot sign away their right to the national minimum wage. I explained the difference between contract, because if an employer is trying to agree with the employee, they are actually contractually being obligated one to another. But national minimum wage is statutorily based, which means the government has actually decreed almost. It is actually it's a mandatory policy on the minimum, so it's non-negotiable, to put it in a mild way. So a worker cannot sign away their right to the national minimum wage. An employer may not force or persuade any worker to agree a wage below the national minimum wage. Such agreements would be invalid. How can a worker make the employer pay the national minimum wage? Stay tuned, continue watching. Good question. The statutory right to be paid at least the national minimum wage that applies to all workers except those groups are not covered, regardless of how long they have worked for their employer. But see also rules about apprentices. Because the system has been broken down, I think that is a form of tactics to kind of like water down the national minimum wage policy. Is quite clever of the government, whose attitude is not to regulate the businesses. So the statutory right to be paid at least the national minimum wage to all workers, except those groups. Like I said, it also applies regardless of the age of the worker, provided they are over compulsory school age or 19 or over if they are an apprentice. But if you watch the rest of the video yesterday, the national minimum wage for different ages applies by way of definition. So indirectly, they are not really paid national minimum wage because of the definitional or even the sectoring of the minimum wage. The minimum wage is broken up. So I think it has to be really reformed, so that young people should be paid adequately, and also adults. The level of minimum wage should be harmonized between all ages. And if you work for living, it doesn't matter who you are, you shouldn't be paid less because you're a child. That is a form of policy corruption by the government, which is reluctant to help people who are poor in this country. This is wrong. It also applies regardless of the age of the worker, provided they are over compulsory school age or 19 or over. If they are on apprentice, there are different rates depending on how old the worker is and whether or not they are an apprentice or a trainee. These are technicalities, and this is not necessary because, see, if there's concept not at work, children on apprentice or training, although they are treated also by law as workers, they should be paid the full salary. This is actually a way of corrupting the policy on people who are already paid law, and hopefully in the future I will give some criticism also, maybe next year, and if like permits, if opportunity presents itself for any worker who is covered by national minimum wage, the right to be paid. And the national minimum wage is a statutory right. To be paid the national minimum wage is a statutory right, and it's implied term in the contract of employment. So that's how it's just translated into contract. This means that a worker who is being paid less than the national minimum wage can go to an employment tribunal or court to recover the difference, the difference between the amount they have been paid and the amount they should be paid under the National Minimum Wage Act 1998. So leave a comment below, stay tuned, continue watching this material. Thank you so much. So before making a claim to an employment tribunal or court, the worker should try to establish whether they are being paid the national minimum wage or not. One way to do this is by making use of their right to access to their right of access to the employer's records. However, this may allow the employer to the possibility of a potential claim for the national minimum wage, which could lead to victimization or dismissal. It may therefore be advisable for the worker to first make an informal approach to the employer. You must always be aware while advising a worker on a lengthy negotiation with an employer that there is a 3 months time limit on making a claim for the national minimum wage to the employment tribunal. The time limit runs from the date of the most recent underpayment of wages. So stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. So although all workers are protected from detriment or dismissal by for trying to enforce the national minimum wage, in practice most workers would rather try to avoid losing their jobs in the first place, and therefore it may be best initially to make an informal approach to the employer. This may reveal that the employer did not realize they were not paying the national minimum wage. If more than one worker is affected, it might be better for a group of workers to meet with the employer so that the employer is less likely to victimize particular individual. If the worker is a member of a trade union, they should consult their trade union. Stay tuned, continue watching, and leave a comment below if the worker does not feel an informal approach to the employer is appropriate. They may agree to negotiate being taken up on their behalf or anonymously by the Citizen Advice, an organization in the United Kingdom. Another advice agency also could be available. Like I said, there are lack of in practice. Actually, this information is good, but in practice is increasingly almost impossible to access help from this organization in the United Kingdom because of funding, because they are part of the public sector. They are actually an example of social sector in the United Kingdom, providing social welfare policy. Like I said previously, employment falls within the social welfare system, but also an economic infrastructure for commercial purposes. Such and leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts about these situations. There is still a danger if the worker is identified by the employer, that the employer may take action against the worker. More about how an organization can negotiate with an employer. Thank you so much. Stay tuned. Continue watching. If the employer does not feel that it would be appropriate for an advice agency to take up their case, they can contact the enforcement agency. Stay tuned. Continue watching. Leave a comment below if you are aware of any enforcement agency in terms of national minimum wage. If after any or all of the steps in the previous paragraph have been taken, the employer still refuses to pay national minimum wage, the worker should make a claim to an employment tribunal. If the enforcement agency has been alerted and is dealing with the situation, the national minimum wage compliance officer will take this action on behalf of the worker, and the worker does not need to make a complaint on their own behalf. I say the major problem in practice about the national minimum wage and also the living wage is the level is too low, and the government can solve the problem one way or the other. Can give grants to small and medium businesses to and ring fence this money to increase the level of national minimum wage, because small and medium business in the UK are shutting down because of corporatization. You know, the argument in the market for bigger and better, because the market is like a jungle. It has its own laws, which if people without power may not access the justice. And because your business can close down. I mean, it can be shut down because if it doesn't make profit. The rule of the game is if you stop making profit, by law you can. I don't have the law. I don't have the information on that type of law. But I know there is law and policy which will shut down your business by force if you don't make profit, because you are crowding up the market. You are like a garbage. You need to be cleansed. The market needs cleansing. Organization which occupy space, empty space. I mean, you are wasting space. The market space. Market space is created as an infrastructure to grow the economy, to create wealth. If you don't create wealth, you are not allowed to be in the market. You are going to be thrown out. So it is so competitive. That's what competition means. That's also the risk of doing business. You start a business, you don't make money. Either you just die, you're natural death, and you have to pay costs here, you have to pay costs there. You cannot survive. So the logic of the market system is to maximize profit so that you survive. And therefore, small and medium business are always very vulnerable. That's why they close down. Every time there's a crisis, they are the first to close down. But big corporations have also closed down in 1997. I think in 1997, yeah, 2007 and 8. Big banks collapsed globally, even including in London. That is why the credit crunch, because these big banks are so big, some of them collapsed because they were not making money. If they don't make money, they shut down. That is an example of a situation where the businesses shut down if they don't make money. Therefore, in terms of public service, if we do as we do now, which is not going to be reversed, the Labour Party said they are not going to be reversing privatization. That's what they said. I don't know, because to provide public service, they have to provide it through partnership with private companies. That means they have to pay private companies and hope that they are honest, that they are not really corrupt, that they will provide public service, because they may use accountants, they may use complicated lawyers to not provide public service so that they take the money by legalized way of theft, if you like, because the system is so complex. And the best approach to public sector would have been the public service. The best approach to provide the public service was for public sector to provide public service. But that is now too late. It's too little, too late now for even for the Labour Party. It's going to be impossible for the Labour Party to renationalize the public sector. I don't think they're going to do it. They said they're not going to do it. So that is going to be global. The reason I talk about the UK is so central to the European Union, which is the hub of the globalization. America, Japan, Indonesia, all these places in Asia, Asia Pacific region, and also in Africa. Privatization is everywhere. We cannot turn the clock back anymore. It's too late. We need just to prepare for what that means. We need to start understanding what privatization has to do, because the public sector is gone. So I'm going to access goods and services which are essential, like food, energy, housing, healthcare, dentistry, or even national security protection. I mean, if you are being attacked by thieves, you call the police. The police ask, the first thing the police ask is your credit card. If you don't have money, you're not going to get a free emergency. And it's already happening now, because now there is a policy of wasting emergency service time. But apart from that, if you phone an emergency service, they are not going to come. It's no longer there. It's gone. Ambulance is gone. Because you see, if you phone an ambulance and they tell you they are not taxis, that's it. There's nothing you can do. You see, because the government has handed over all the power. It is the end. And if you want to learn about it, if you don't want to, it's your life, it's survival. You have to survive. If you are not fit, you're not going to survive. That is the situation we have in the country. And I'm not saying it's going to, the world is going to end tomorrow. I'm not saying that. But the world is ending anyway. If you talk in terms of in 100 years and 500 years, that's why sometimes people don't understand what I'm talking about. It's like the end is tomorrow. The end of the beginning is now there. People do not see it because they don't pay attention. People who see it, a lot of people are trying to commit suicide now as I speak because of poverty. Poverty is real now. People are being sent into public facilities which are shutting down also. Sooner or later, people will be on the street. A lot of people are now on the street. They are seen as if they are of mental illness because the local authorities are not giving housing anymore. You see, that is the reality. Because you have to check if you phone the council and try to get a property. If you are 18, if you are homeless, go to the council and tell them you are homeless. They will assess within rules of housing, and they will say you are eligible for housing, but you're not going to get housing. You're going to be sent to rent privately, and the British people do not know. And if you try to talk to the British people are so confused because the information is there, but it's so complex to access. That's why I try to go on. You can find this information anywhere online. They're there because they are almost all of them are generated by government departments. Almost all of them, because information actually comes from the public office for information. So these are online. But it is so difficult to understand it. Employment law, which I'm going through, is the same with housing law, the same with benefit law, health law, legal process, legal system. This is information on the government website. They are processed. They are supposed to be accessible, and they are. But still, it is not really easy to kind of like deal with it. You need professionals, but these professionals cannot now provide services because they don't have resources. and that is the predicament in the UK. And the reason I'm talking about the UK is because I live in the UK, and what happened in the UK is also happening all over the world. It's about globalization. I want people to try and understand this. If they can, if you cannot, leave a comment below. Let me know what you are really thinking. So excited that I've been able to discuss this. So let us talk. Employer wants to make a national minimum wage claim to an employment tribunal under this circumstance. What do you do? So stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. If the worker is an employee, they should raise a grievance with their employer if there is time to do and so within the time limits to make a claim to a tribunal. Worker who is not an employee is not expected to raise a grievance before making a claim to the tribunal. However, if there is any doubt about the worker's employment status, they should raise a grievance if there is time within the time limit to make a tribunal claim, as any subsequent award from a tribunal may be reduced if the are actually an employee, and it would have been reasonable for them to raise a grievance. More about raising a grievance online, you can look at this information. Making a tribunal claim for say an employee can enforce their right to the national minimum wage by making a claim to an employment tribunal. They can they will have to make a claim on unlawful deduction from wages under Part 2 of the Employment Rights Act 1996 in Northern Ireland, and Part 4 of the Employment Rights Northern Ireland Order 1996, and therefore does not need to have work for the employer for any particular length of time in order to make a claim. The amount of the unlawful deduction will be the difference between their actual gross pay and what they should receive under the national minimum wage regulation. The workers who qualify for the national minimum wage but who would not normally have the right to make a claim for unlawful deduction from wages because they are not employees will be able to make a claim to an employment tribunal for this deduction under the national minimum wage regulation. This is particularly relevant to agency workers and home workers. And if you can find this information online, the 3 months time limit for working, making a claim to an employment tribunal for the national minimum wage for detriment conducted with it and for non-production of records applies to these workers. You can find out more online about unlawful deduction or from wages, and when taking a case to an employment tribunal, the burden of proof is on the employer to show that the worker has been paid at a rate at least equal to the national minimum wage. This is unusual as in all other matters taken to an employment tribunal. The burden of proof is on the employee to show that they have a case. Leave a comment below, let me know your thinking. This means that when completing the ET1 form for the employment tribunal, the worker merely needs to say that they believe they are not receiving the national minimum wage which they are entitled to. There are always costs associated with these processes. However, if the worker has some information about their about how their pay is calculated, they may wish to include this on the ET1 form as part of their evidence to the tribunal. More about how to make a claim to an employment tribunal. Thank you so much. Stay tuned. Continue watching. How far back can claims be made? Claims for unemployment deduction from wages must be made within 3 months of the date of the deduction, or if there has been more than one occasions of deduction within 3 months of the last of the series of deduction. This means that workers can claim several years of back pay provided they make a claim within 3 months of the last date of other or non payment of wages. wages. Stay tuned, continue watching, let me know your thoughts, leave a comment below, stay tuned, subscribe to this channel if you haven't subscribed, and also subscription is free, like I said always. It's just a case of taking a step, and it doesn't cost you very much, even if in the terms of internet, because it's so easy. You just click and space I think a link. You click a link for subscription, then you subscribe, it is free, and also click notification, and all these are free as well. Not to be confused, my channel is too small to accommodate members. I'm not allowed to. I mean, the system is automated. Automatically, it doesn't actually. There is no capacity for me to get membership. Membership is paid for. So if my channel grow up to a certain level, then you have the option to join membership if you are interested, for one benefit or another, coming from coming from the channel. Claims for unlawful deduction from wages made on or after the 1st July 2015 will be limited to 2 years before the date on which the claim is made. So clients who have claims for more than 2 years unpaid national minimum wage should be advised to present their claim for the 1st July 2015. Deadline is extremely important, so people should really pay attention to the deadline. Alternatively, they should be advised that they will be better off by complaining to the ACAS F-line, because there is no limit on back pay or making a claim to the county court, sheriff court in Scotland. See the next paragraph. Online as it is, making a claim in the county court, sheriff court in Scotland. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned, continue watching. Employees who can claim for the national minimum wage in either an employment tribunal or the court, that can be done. Thank you so much. Stay tuned, continue watching. So, like I said, employees can make a claim for the national minimum wage in either an employment tribunal or a court. Workers are entitled to make a claim for the national minimum wage in an employment tribunal because instead can instead claim for a breach of contract in the court. Thank you so much. Stay tuned. Continue watching. This is because the right to the national minimum wage is an implied term of all workers' contracts. There are reasons why worker may prefer to take their case to court rather than an employment tribunal. For example, cases can go to the court up to 6 years after the offense has taken place. More about choosing between the employment tribunal and the court when negotiating about cuts in pay. One thing I can comment is that if you master this information aspects, if you have dispute with your employer, you can represent yourself in court, and that will save you a lot of money, because a lot of these facilities are paid for. They are subject to the court cost, and if it is not, then we'll let you know if I find the information, or you can look for yourself. But 9 out of 10 times you will always pay. So when taking a case to the court, the burden of proof is on the employer to show that the worker has been paid at a rate at least equal to the national minimum wage. If you have to pay for it, if you lose the case in court, you will be liable for podcast. This is something, if I find information, I will share with you. If you're interested, everybody should be interested in employment law and policy in the United Kingdom and also across the globe, whichever country you are. So this is a good material. And if you work for living, but in our human nature, you wait until you are in a crisis, then you look for help, which is good. It's okay. You don't die before your time. and so you are, but if you choose to do that, then it's really important. Let's put this thing here so that I try to understand what people think about it. Leave a comment below, let me know what you're thinking. And so when taking a case, the court, the burden of proof, as it were, is on the side of the employment in relation to this matter. National minimum wage pay, the right not to be dismissed or suffer detriment because of the national minimum wage. There is a 3 months time limit on making a claim to an employment tribunal for dismissal or detriment in connection with the national minimum wage. The time limit runs from the date of the dismissal or the act of detriment. There's a deadline here to pay attention in case all workers who qualify for the national minimum wage can make a claim to an employment tribunal for automatic and fair dismissal if they are dismissed or suffer detriment in their terms and conditions of employment on the grounds that they are or will be entitled to the national minimum wage. This applies to all workers regardless of age or how long they have worked to the employer. Thank you so much. Continue watching. Stay tuned. For example, if an employer realizes that a worker will become entitled to national minimum wage and as a consequence dismisses and replaces them with a younger worker who would not qualify, this would be regarded automatically as an unfair dismissal. Stay tuned. Continue watching. Leave a comment below. Let me know under these circumstances what you might or might not think employer should follow a dismissal or disciplinary procedure before dismissing or taking disciplinary action against an employee. More about dismissal or disciplinary procedure. Thank you so much. Stay tuned. Continue watching. The employer victimizes for example, detriment include the employer where the employer victimizes the worker because they have taken action over the national minimum wage. For example, they have made a complaint to the enforcement agency of the national minimum wage. You comment below, let me know what you think. The employer also, under these circumstances, the employer realizes that the worker will qualify for the national minimum wage, so increases their weekly hours without increasing their pay. This means that the worker is getting paid the same for the week, but is working more hours. This is also not allowed, but it is very easy to do because in practice, employees are less and less protected, under this law. They are very weak in protecting the employee. So this is a detriment to the worker unless they agree to the change in their contractual hours. Because when you talk about agreement, it's as if in practice you are able to do that. Because see, employers have all sorts of tricks in their books to get rid of employee. For one reason or another, they have a lot of power because of the system in practice. So leave a comment below, let me know what you think. This is a detriment to the worker unless they agree to change in their contractual hours. In addition, in such cases, an employer may try to increase the number of hours a worker works without amending the contract of employment in an effort to hide the extra hours the worker is working. So this is a good example. This represents a change to the worker's contract which they have not agreed to, and is also therefore a detriment. A detriment is a concept. The comment below if you know what it is. If you don't know what it is, stay tuned. Continue watching. Thank you so much. The employer may withdraw certain benefit from the worker which have been agreed as part of their employment contract. For example, sick pay, bonus pay, or contractual holiday pay. This represents change to the workers' contract, which they have not agreed to, and it is therefore a detriment. Stay tuned, continue watching, leave a comment below, let me know. Always remember that the contract of employment does not have to be in writing. Any changes the employer makes to the contract without the workers' agreement are unilateral changes to the contract. More about contracts of employment. Thank you so much. Stay tuned, continue watching. The burden of proof is on the employer to show that they have not made the worker suffer a detriment. The employment tribunal will take a view as to whether it believes the figures presented by the employer. Stay tuned, continue watching. In a case of detriment, a worker can make a claim to an employment tribunal, but will have to consider carefully how secure their job is. The Citizen Advice Bureau should negotiate with the employer, and it may be possible for the worker to contact for other advice services as such agencies such as their trade union if they are a member concerned, public concern at work, or enforcement agency. There is also the ACAS helpline. More about how these agencies may operate in one way or the other. But in practice, like I said repeatedly, that in practice, these organizations do not receive enough support from the government. So the government attitude to the public sector is negative in terms of funding, because if these organizations are not funded by the government, they are there on policy, on the document, but in practice they don't exist anymore, because these organizations cannot afford to even operate. They are there, they're operating, they are just hanging in there, but in practice they are not able to do the work the way they should, and the need is not being met. This is the reality on the ground. It may not be known to the government, it may not be known. So if you are interested in this, you can be a campaign, you can do your own research. And also, if you are in a situation, maybe you're not getting enough benefit, maybe you feel the level of minimum wage is so low, maybe you have a problem with your employer, flexible hours and stuff like that, and certain demands being made, maybe from the energy company, because it can come from everywhere in terms of public service. From energy, maybe if you go to the supermarket, you get food which is already expired being displayed on the supermarket. There are certain rights which you should be aware, because you can end up buying a food which is not really fit for consumption. So I'm just making that comment. Thank you so much for visiting, and also stay tuned, continue watching. So the role of the enforcement agency and national minimum wage compliance officer, stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. So you have a team of government enforcement officers ensuring that employers pay the national minimum wage. These are officers of the His Majesty Revenue and Customs are based in regional offices of His Majesty Revenues and Customs Office, otherwise tax and maybe customs office. They are called National Minimum Wage Compliance Officers. Stay tuned, continue watching, leave a comment below. If a worker or a CB advisor wishes to contact the enforcement agency, there is a particular procedure they must follow. They should report the problem online or call the ACAS helpline. And stay tuned, continue watching. If the call concerns complaint about an employer, the helpline staff will take the details of the complaint and pass it on to the National Minimum Wage Compliance team. The team will investigate all calls from workers who give their name and contact details, even if the amount involved is small. They only investigate some calls from third parties, for example, advisors, or if workers won't give their name. The compliance team will consider the complaint and, if appropriate, will make contact with the employer to explain the nature of the complaint. If the complaint is not resolved by the team contacting the employer, the complaint can be referred to a national minimum wage compliance officer. They will formally take up the case on behalf of the worker and will want to inspect the employer's records on a national minimum wage. Let's look at confidentiality of complaints. So if a worker makes a complaint but doesn't want their employers to know the complaint, His Majesty Revenue and Customs will keep the identity and details confidential. The person investigating the complaint isn't told who made it, so they can't disclose that information. They will ask for all pay records for all workers or all workers in a particular role. If it is a large workforce, this should mean that the employer doesn't know who complained. Stay tuned, continue watching, and therefore, however, the worker should be aware that if they work for a very small company or if the only person doing a particular job in a company, the employer may guess who has made the complaint. A worker who discloses wrongdoing by the employer is protected by the Public Interest Disclosure Act 1998. If a worker is victimized or dismissed following a protected disclosure under the Act, they can make a claim to an employment tribunal. A disclosure is protected if it is made either by a lawyer or to a regulatory body. In this case, HMR, Revenue and Customs Services. A worker who needs more information about protected disclosures should be referred to public concern at work. Stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. So the National Minimum Wage Compliance Officers carry out spot checks on employers they know don't pay the national minimum wage. They won't actively inspect the record of all employers, and so cases need to be brought to their attention by workers or others, such as Citizen Advice Bureau advisors. Stay tuned, continue watching. So, powers of National Minimum Wage Compliance Officers. Let us look at that. The National Minimum Compliance Officer can take action to enforce the national minimum wage on behalf of a worker, rather than relying on the worker to start proceeding through the employment tribunal to court themselves. Stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. So the National Minimum Wage Compliance Officer has the power to force an employer to produce records, force an employer to provide an explanation of these records, force an employer to provide any other information relevant to the case. Also can force an employer to give access to relevant premises, for example, to see our workers are actually employed, or to ensure records are not falsified. Stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. From the 6th of April, stay tuned, continue watching. So from the 6th of April 2009, search on employers' premises and seize document. From the 6th of April 2009, they can also remove an employer's national minimum wage records for photocopying. Stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. Before the 6th of April 2009, if the national minimum wage compliance officer decides that the employer is paying the worker or workers less than national minimum wage, they can serve an enforcement notice on the employer requiring them to pay the worker or workers at a rate at least equal to the national minimum wage. The notice may may include a requirement to pay workers the national minimum wage in respect of past period of work if the national minimum wage should have been paid and has not been. this notice can be backdated to the date the legislation came into effect, which is also into force as from the 1st April 1999. Stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. From 6th of April 2009, if the National Minimum Wage compliant officer decides that the employer is paying the worker less than national minimum wage, they may issue a notice of underemployment requiring the employer to pay arrears to the workers, and a fine. Arrears will be repaid at the current rate, where there is higher than the rate the rates which applied when the arrears arose. Stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. So the enforcement notice or notice of underemployment will also include information on the employer's right of appeal to unemployment tribunal. Stay tuned, continue watching. Thank you so much. So if the employer does not comply with the enforcement notice, the National Minimum Wage Compliance Officer on behalf of one or more workers can complain to an employment tribunal or take action in the civil courts to recover the difference between what the workers have been paid and what they should have been paid. This payment is then made to the worker. The National Minimum Wage Compliance Officer can do this on behalf of the worker, even if that worker is no longer employed by the employer. You can check for details online or serve a penalty notice on the employer requiring them to pay a fine in respect of any periods during which the national minimum wage has not been paid before the 6th of April 2009. The fine per worker was twice the hourly rate for each day if it has not been paid. The hourly rate is always the main adult rate, even if the worker would be entitled to a lower rate of national minimum wage. The fine for periods of underpayment beginning on or after the 6th of April 2009 is 50% of the total underemployment. There is a minimum penalty of £100 and a maximum of 5,000. Employers who fully comply with the notice of underemployment within 14 days of service will be given a 50% reduction on their penalty. The fine for the period of unemployment beginning on or after the 7th of March 2014 is 100% of the total underpayment, with the maximum penalty being £20,000 per worker. The employer has the right of appeal against the imposition of any fine. In addition to the penalties above, the National Minimum Wage Compliance Officer may start criminal proceedings against the employer. These may be used where the employer refuses or willfully neglects to pay the national minimum wage, fails to keep record, and produces false recording or obstructs an officer in the course of their duties. Criminal proceedings are only likely to be used in exceptional cases. In such cases, if the employer is found guilty, they can be fined up to £5,000 or for each offense, which means they can be fined up to £5,000 for each worker to whom they have not paid national minimum wage. From 6th of April 2009, in England and Wales, the most serious offences can be tried in the Crown Court. In Scotland, the prosecutor fiscal will decide which court will deal with the case. Thank you for watching this material. I'll see you in the next video. For now, and leave a comment below, subscribe to this channel, and click like, click notification bell. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye bye. So like I said,